Alrighty folks, thanks for clicking on today's video. James Cards FC here, and today I'm going to be doing a follow-up to the fireside chat that I had last week, where I'm going to be going through the Q&A that I was supposed to be having live, so instead we'll go through the Q&A now. We're going to be talking about some match-worn Messi cards, we're going to talk about breaking, low-end cards, and a couple more topics. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the Q&A for April of 2023. So, starting off with low-end cards, what do I do with my low-end raw cards that I want to sell was the basic question that I got. So low-end raw cards, if you're not familiar, these would be pretty much any type of non-graded card. Could be a base card, an insert card, a colored card of a less desired player that sells for under $5. That would be my definition of a low-end card or a low-end raw card. So in general, selling these can be difficult because there's so many color card options on the market nowadays that take away from the desire for these cards. A lot of the time, these lower end cards are of players that aren't as interesting. So for example, instead of Messi, it's PK. Instead of Neymar, it's Thiago Silva. So those factors go into it being a less expensive and a lower end card. So selling these can be pretty difficult when there are so many more desirable options on the market. You're trying to find a very specific sort of buyer to take on these sorts of cards. So if I was trying to sell low-end raw cards, which I have done in the past, I would do the following. So if the card is worth more than $2, I would go ahead and send it to ComC, and from there, ComC will cross-post the card onto eBay for you, and you can manage it like a normal buy it now or best offer listing without having to have the card in person. So if you're sitting on piles and piles of low-end raw cards, this could be a good option for you to free up some space and let ComC deal with storing it and shipping it and all that kind of fun stuff. So ComC does charge a 50-cent service fee, which is why the card, in my opinion, needs to be worth over $2. This might not be an option for those of you that are international, where the shipping would pretty much kill this idea because it's going to be more expensive to ship it than it is going to be to make it worth it to send to ComC. So if you're international, you can probably just ignore that. But if you're in the United States, I would highly recommend using ComC for lower end cards that are worth more than $2. Anything in like the $2 to $20-ish range, I think ComC is a really good place to have those listed. And then if the card is worth less than $2, or if you're international, I would go ahead and list those cards on eBay in a lot with other similar cards in it. So an example of a lot would be a lot of 10 Barcelona player cards from the same set, in case people are trying to put together a team set from that set that you have the raw cards from, or for another example, a lot of 10 Neymar cards from different sets. Maybe somebody just wants to buy a bunch of Neymar cards for their collection, and you have a variety of low-end Neymar cards. Putting those in a lot of 10 makes a lot of sense, and you can probably find a buyer for that. So as I say here, you can use buy it now, best offer, or auction for these. I personally would be looking to get rid of these types of cards as fast as possible so that you can free up the cash that is in those cards to move up into better cards. But if you want to play the more waiting and passive approach and try and get the most value possible out of these low-end cards, you could leave them on buy it now or best offer, but I personally would just be looking to get rid of them as fast as possible so that you can move into some things that are probably more desired in the market and allows you to use your money in some more interesting ways. So those would be my basic tips for trying to move low-end raw cards. Then I'll go ahead and move my camera up here, and we'll continue through the rest of the video. So, match-worn Messi cards. This was a good question. 2022 National Treasures features match-worn Messi patch cards. The person that left this comment said they got one, which is really, really cool. I love Messi match-worn patch cards, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in this slide. So, like the viewer said here, most other high-end sets, including older versions of Immaculate, Museum Collection, Obsidian, etc., do not feature match-worn patches for Messi. Is this 2022 National Treasures patch the first match-worn one for Messi? And if so, where does that place them in his market? So, to answer the first part of the question, those are not the first match-worn Messi patches. They are some of the most affordable Messi match-worn patches, probably because it's in a newer product, but there are some previous ones that we'll go through today. So the first Messi match-worn patch comes from the 2013 Icon set that I have a picture of right there. It's the one where he's kissing the Ballon d'Or. There's a few different variations of this card, but they are all Messi's first licensed match-worn patch cards. Even unlicensed, I think these are probably the first match-worn ones. I don't know. I tend to try and ignore Futera just because there's a lot of questions around the licensing and stuff like that. So without further ado, we'll go forward. That is the first match-worn Messi licensed patch card. If you want to skip the icons set because it's technically only licensed for Messi and not any other player or club, then the next first set would be 2015 Panini Flawless, but there's only one card variation with a match-worn patch, and it's extremely expensive. It is this one that I have in the video right here on the slide. It's the one where he's signing the Soul of the Game boot patch. It's from a match-worn boot from Messi, and it is extremely expensive. Depending on the numbering of the card, whether it be out of 10 or out of 25 or out of 5, there's a bunch of different versions of it, but even the least expensive version is around $15,000 or $20,000. So that is a very, very expensive card because it is a non-card auto. It comes from Flawless. It has a match-worn patch. All those reasons make it really, really, really expensive. So probably not in the ballpark of anybody that watches these videos. Maybe it's in your ballpark for you. If it is, I think it's a really cool card. I personally definitely cannot afford that right now, but a very, very nice looking Messi card that has a lot of strong factors going for it. After that card and after the Icons card, it gets a little bit more difficult. There's a few rare cards from some high-end sets that feature match-worn cards, including Immaculate and Gold Standard. I have a few of them on this slide as well. That booklet is a match-worn patch. That jersey right there on that specific Immaculate card is match-worn, but a lot of them are not. That Gold Standard patch is match-worn, but a lot of the Gold Standard stuff is not match-worn. And that Nike patch from the Immaculate collection is match-worn, but again, there's a lot of Immaculates that aren't. So it's a very case-by-case basis. The higher end or lower number the parallel, the more likely it is to be match-worn, but make sure you're checking the back of every single card so that you know if it is match-worn or not. So to sum it all up, overall, since Messi has so few truly match-worn patches, I think it's a good narrative to have in the future for his cards, especially for his active playing seasons. So when he retires in 2026 or 2025, and they continue to bring out match-worn cards after the fact, those will likely be less valuable than the ones when he was an active player. We see this with guys like Michael Jordan and other players that retire and then get match-worn stuff after they've retired. The stuff after their retirement usually sells for a heavy discount on the stuff that was from their active playing years. So I really like these cards. I like the narrative. I don't necessarily know if it's going to go to the moon or anything like that, but I think it's a nice narrative to have going forward, especially because right now there are so few of them. But I do say Fanatics could come in and print these types of cards to the moon in the next couple of seasons, so be aware of that. I don't think it's likely that they get access to Messi's match-worn stuff easily, so I don't know if they're going to be able to print a bunch of them, but it's possible that somehow they are able to do that, so just keep an eye on that as we go through these next few seasons. Alrighty. Then we'll talk about players from low-ranked national teams. The question was that I had mentioned Enciso in the Premier League Prism checklist review, and that he plays for Paraguay, a national team that no one follows. How do I think this will affect his prices? And in bigger picture, guys like Holland, how does it affect their prices? So I've talked about this in a few of the deeper dive videos, but in my opinion, in the ultra modern market, you're looking for players that can create FOMO, or a fear of missing out moment or stretch of play. So in order to create that fear of missing out moment or stretch of play, you want a player to have the most opportunities possible to have a big moment or a big performance. This could be from a league performance, a European competition, or a national competition, and so the performance can come from any of those, but what you're really looking for is one of those moments to happen so that people rush to buy the player's cards. So unfortunately for Enciso, he can only really create a big moment in the Premier League right now, since unless he has a huge game for Paraguay against the United States, nobody is following Paraguay to be aware of his performances there. So if Paraguay drubs Honduras 6-0 and he scores a hat-trick, no one's probably going to hear about it because nobody's following those national teams. But if he does that against the United States, he probably starts getting some buzz. But like I said, most of the games that Paraguay plays, nobody's going to be paying attention to. If he scores a couple goals against Grenada, nobody is going to care. If he scores one goal against El Salvador, nobody's going to notice. But if he does something against the United States, or he does something in a big Premier League match against United or Arsenal or something like that, then people start taking notice. So I say here that perhaps Brighton qualifies for a European competition spot this season and in future seasons, and that would give Enciso, if he's still there, more opportunities to have a big performance in a big match and try and create that FOMO effect. moving from this to moving to Haaland. Haaland's a bit different because he's one of the top players in the world, and with that, people are always following his performances, and he plays for a huge club, so he's always in the headlines. Very, very different player in this case. And Enciso's a completely random prospect that you're hoping has a couple moments that it makes him pop off. He's never going to be Haaland. So two completely different guys, two completely different markets. But Haaland's one of the best players in the world. People are following his performances every game, no matter what. Enciso, you're hoping maybe they'll follow one or two games. But back to Haaland, his national team is also not as bad as some people make it out to be. Norway is so much better than Paraguay is. And Norway, with the expanded tournament for 2026 World Cup, they're likely to at least make the tournament. They're probably not going to do anything when they get there, but they are likely to make the tournament, and Haaland's matches will be followed very heavily. So despite the fact that they're only going to play a few matches, everyone's going to have their eyes on Haaland, and if he scores a few goals, that could be really good for his market. Whereas with Enciso, even if Paraguay does make the tournament, I don't think people are going to be following those matches, so it's really tough for him to sort of create that buzz, and that's really the difference between the two players, is that Haaland is already followed in pretty much every match because of how good he is, whereas a guy like Enciso, or insert any prospect from a low-ranked national team, nobody's following them yet, and so they would need to have big performances in big stages in order to try and get that following started. So those are my thoughts on lower ranked national team players. In terms of looking at this for like the super long term, I honestly have no idea how Haaland playing for Norway is going to affect his legacy in the long run. Is he going to end up being like a Lewandowski, where his prices are severely undercut because he plays for a national team that nobody follows and can't win major tournaments, and there's other players in his era that are more flashy and more followed than he is? I have no idea. Haaland might be a bit different because he could end up winning a few Ballon d'Ors if he keeps up his scoring pace as these other legends like Messi, Ronaldo, Benzema, etc. start to retire. He could start racking up Ballon d'Ors, but again, he's going to be competing with guys like Mbappe and even guys that we don't even talk about right now, like Endrick or maybe Messinho or these other random Brazilians that we have no idea who they are. Over the next 5 to 10 years, those will probably be the types of guys that will be fighting Haaland and Mbappe for Ballon d'Ors. So that sort of future projection is just anyone's guess at this point, and I don't have a good answer for what playing for Norway is going to do to his market in the long run. Alrighty, then we'll move into off the pitch and its effects on prices. So this was a general question. How do I think a player's off-pitch actions affects their prices? Examples would be Platini for negative and Rashford for positive. So I personally think that the actions would need to completely narrative shift either in a positive or negative way the player's entire legacy to have any sort of impact on their prices. In the most extreme end, you have guys like Mason Greenwood, where even if he does make a comeback to play at some point, I assume there is a percentage of people that will never buy his cards no matter how well he plays, and so that's an extreme example of a negative narrative that came from off-the-pitch actions. So just be aware that sort of stuff is probably out there for Mason Greenwood. Platini is another good example because despite the corruption narrative, his cards, at least the really good ones, still sell for a decent amount. Would they sell for more without the narrative? Probably, but it hasn't completely destroyed his market. The Rashford is a great person, so people will buy his cards narrative was super popular in 2019 and 2020 when the market was starting to take off for soccer. But then when his performance dipped in 2021 and 2022, that narrative stopped completely, and nobody cared if Rashford was a really good person if his performances were bad. So on-field performance is by far the most important factor. Even in the case of Rashford, being a great person has not saved his prices. And even though he had this great stretch of form recently, his prices are already starting to draw back to where they were when he wasn't playing well. So really finicky market Rashford's is, but it's definitely not propped up or going to be saved by the fact that he's a really good person. So I would ignore the off-the-pitch type narratives unless they're extremely negative, i.e. a guy like Greenwood. I'm personally not interested in anything Greenwood, and I think a lot of people are not interested in anything Greenwood. No matter how well he plays, he's always going to have that thing sticking over his head. So I am personally avoiding his market completely, and I am looking at other players that don't have that sort of baggage on their narrative. So that is my thoughts on off the pitch and how it affects people's or players' prices. And then we'll move to the last topic here, which is breaking. It's a really simple question. Do I ever break? And if I did, what times would I break? Personally, I break product like myself and just for myself maybe once or twice a year, and it's usually extremely low priced product. Back in like 2019 or 2020, we could buy Mega Cracks boxes from Spain for $50 or $60. I'm talking about Mega Cracks from the 2010s era, and I really like breaking that because there were a lot of fun inserts in it, and it was super, super cheap. So I used to break that every few months or so, but ever since product got ridiculously expensive for soccer, I haven't broke pretty much at all. Maybe I'll do it once a year, but it's usually extremely low priced product. And then in terms of break hosting, I don't have any interest in ever doing so. Breaking, in my opinion, and in reality, is 100% gambling, and you're essentially just pulling the lever of a slot machine with the breaker being the owner of that slot machine. And I personally don't want to have to worry about filling breaks, shipping, advertising, doing all the stuff that's associated with breaking. Not to mention my computer and my internet. It's not nearly good enough to be doing that, but I just have no interest in hosting breaks, but hats off to the people that do. It is definitely a business that is very popular in the hobby, and Fanatics has made it known that it's going to be a focus of theirs to continue doing this going forward. So the people that are breaking right now might be able to get some sort of a deal with Fanatics to break product for them exclusively in the future. So perhaps that is something that is interesting to the breakers out there. And then just a couple more thoughts here. It's been estimated that breaks have an average ROI of 20 to 30% of the box price. So unless you're doing it purely for fun, I can't see a reason to ever enter a break in terms of like a play or a money-making perspective. It's just gambling. So if you want to gamble for fun and you like gambling for fun, you probably like breaking in that aspect. I personally have better odds playing the Raw to Grade game, and I have much more fun doing that than I would ever entering a break. And also, it's probably better just buying the cards you want to hit in the break. I gave this example down below. This Julio Enciso Prism rookie numbered out of 49 sold for $23.50 on auction a few days ago, and this is the price of a 4 hobby box random team break. It's $63. So would I rather have 2 Julio Enciso rookies numbered out of 49 or 1 random team spot in a 4 hobby box break where the best card in that entire break is probably not going to be as good as this Julio Enciso? I don't know. I would probably much rather take the 2 Julio Encisos, or even a better Julio Enciso. Maybe there's 1 out of 25 I could get for $63. So that sort of thing weighs on my mind when you look at the cost of breaks versus the cost of a card you could just buy outright. And in pretty much every single case, I would just take the card that I could buy outright. So those are my thoughts on breaking, and that will go ahead and conclude today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This concludes the Q&A for March or April of 2023. My next video, I'm actually not sure what it's going to be. I have a PSA submission that I am waiting to complete the selling process of so that I can show you from start to finish, prepping the submission, sending the submission, the grades I got, and then what eventually they sold for. So rolling that all together into one video, planning on doing that at least when everything sells through so I can get that data for you guys. But other than that, it'll just be whatever pops into my head over these next few days or weeks. So as always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next video.